All right. Well, today's a little bit different. Well, we like to keep listeners on their toes, and we've got two co-hosts on today. First, Justin is returning we had him on episode 34, The Great Pumpkin Maker, and Justin's joining us from Toronto again. Welcome, Justin.
Tokyo this time, but
what did I say?
In Toronto.
Tokyo.
It's a bit early at the end of the week on your end.
It is. I've got the coffee going here, as I mentioned to our other guests that I've been injecting for about the last half hour. So hopefully that kicks in soon. But yes, we have a second guest. We talked about this as one of those rare shows where listeners like the show so much they want to come on as guests and step behind the mic and get in on the conversation. So we have a third person today, which is Sileem, who's also joining us from Tokyo, not Toronto, but Tokyo. The three of us have been friends for, most of the time that I was in Tokyo. And I guess that's about 3 years now. And Sileem and I met each other through work and hung out a lot outside of work, tipped a few pints, got to know each other as friends, and certainly one of the people I miss most since being back in Canada, of course, along with you too, Justin. But Sileem, tell us a little bit about yourself, and feel free to share as little or as much as you like. We try to protect the innocent on here, but why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Clark. First of all, I must say I am a big fan of the show. Like I've listened to, I'm pretty sure every single episode.
Twice over.
Twice over, of course. I don't know what that says about me or sort of how much time I have, but suffice it to say, I just really enjoy this show. So
thank you.
Yeah, to the listeners, I'm Sileem, Clark's friend, also Justin's friend as well. So we're all friends here, and I always have a little bit of trouble introducing myself. I mean, what do you say, right? So a bit of a unique background. I'm Egyptian Japanese. I live in Tokyo. There aren't a whole lot of people with my kind of background, so that's always kind of a safe place to start. I'm 28, recently married. And
yes, congratulations.
Thank you very much. No kids. I dabble in everything, know a little bit about everything, or try to know a little bit about everything. Not very good at any one thing in particular. So that's me. Hopefully we can, I'll be able to talk about many different things with you.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Yeah, we'll unlock some more of our personalities as we get into some of these topics today, which I was glad to have you guys both send some ideas. We bounced a few things around, and we decided that we were going to talk about a couple of things. I had a book that I used, I think it was like the third or fourth episode, called The Book of Thunks, that I'll say they contain a number of thought-provoking questions, some super simple and some a little bit strange. And so I went through that book again because I thought it'd be a nice way to break the ice a little bit with a couple questions I found in there that could be interesting. Then we're going to talk about something Justin wanted to bring to the table around parents and things our parents did or didn't do that we want to replicate or not replicate for ourselves and our kids. And then our third segment is going to be a little bit about men's fashion. Whenever somebody asks me about the show, I usually say, well, we talk about men's health, we talk a little bit about parenting, sometimes even men's fashion will come up. So this is a good topic. I don't think we've talked about fashion on this show recently, so that's good. And then we're going to finish up with our strange news story, which Sileem's brought something for us today. So looking forward to that. Okay, from the Book of Thunks, if you had been born taller, would you be a different person than now? If you'd been born taller, would you be a different person than now? Justin, you're already tall. What comes to mind when you think of that question?
I actually have a friend who's about 210 centimeters, which I think is around 6'10" or so.
Whoa, okay.
And what he's said to me on multiple occasions when we've been out at night, and he lives here in Tokyo, so it's quite a sight for Tokyoites. What he said to me on multiple occasions is, Justin, you only like to hang out with me because people stare at you instead of staring at me. He's saying it half in jest, of course, but I think what would be different is a glance would turn into a stare. I think that, sure, it's nice being tall. It's nice being tall in a place like here. You do stand out. It's easy for other people to find you. I just stand still and they can look for me.
Yes.
But if I'm that tall, it goes from an uncomfortable existence of ducking under ledges and doorways and trying to get in and out of the train and getting whacked by different things to just a perpetual life of physical misery, I would say. This world in general, and here Tokyo specifically, is just not built for people who are over maybe 5'10", 5'11". So from my perspective, that would be the physical part of what's different if I was taller. Yeah. But from the standpoint of embracing one's uniqueness and maybe even embracing some of how that can play to your advantage, it'd be fantastic. I was a decent athlete growing up. Maybe I'd be playing in the NBA. There's not.
And how tall are you now, Justin?
6'3", 6'4", about 191, 192 centimeters. There's not a very high percentage of people in the world that are about 7 feet tall. And of the people who are 7 feet tall, the percentage of which who've played professional basketball is very high.
Right. Huh.
So once you get over that 210 to 214 centimeters area, 7 feet tall area, you pretty much got a good shot of getting into the league. And as you know, and as we previously potted about, I'm a huge fan of the NBA. So what would I be doing, or what would I be doing differently? Maybe I'd be playing in the NBA or in Europe or here in Japan. Who knows?
Yeah. How about you, Sileem?
Yeah, so really interesting question. I'm obviously on the other side of the spectrum, and I'm pretty short, right? I'm pretty short. I think last time I measured, I'm like 5'5", so 165 centimeters. So that's even short by Japanese standards, which for, by Western standards, I'm, practically, well, super short. I don't know. I mean, if I were taller, how would that impact my life? I always looked at other people who were taller than me, and, I just thought, well, that's cool. And then just tried to look at it the other way. It's like, well, I'm short, economy class on airplanes. Love it. Leg room problems. I just don't have have that. Right. But yeah, I mean, obviously, taller people, I guess it's just like a psychology thing, right? Being taller is associated with, especially for men, like, it's kind of, I guess, more masculine. It's associated with, can be associated with power, right? As well. If you're tall enough, you could join the NBA, like Justin said, and that could lead to a pretty interesting life, I imagine. But yeah, I guess I'm happy that I am what I am, the size that I am at the moment. Would I have been any better off if I were taller? I don't know. Can't say that would be the case, but it would be interesting.
Yeah, and it's an interesting question because it's if you were taller, would you be a different person? Like, would you act differently? Because I think a lot of tall people sometimes there can be very awkward people. Like they're conscious of being so tall and often can be very awkward with that tallness. So I'm in the middle of you guys. I'm 5'10", which I forget what that is in centimeters, but I'm right in the middle. So for me, yeah, I've looked at taller people and said, oh, that'd be cool to be tall, especially athletes, whether it's basketball or baseball or many sports, they tend to be tall people, hockey. And yeah, I would look at those guys. Oh yeah, if I had been another 4 inches higher, 6 feet or more, maybe that would have meant something athletically for me that I don't presently have. I would say that yes. So my answer to it would be yes. I would be different. I don't know exactly how, but I think I would be slightly different if I was. I guess it depends how much taller too. If I was 7 feet tall, that's different. And I used to think about that in Tokyo, like you were saying, Justin, that I occasionally almost bump my head into things and have not really bumped it in regular public places, but like I feel sometimes like I'm just missing some of those overhanging signs through the tunnels, and I think, geez, another couple inches and you could really seriously hurt yourself.
Yeah, at least once a month, I clock my head on something.
Yeah.
Wow.
No,
Yeah.
It doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. If I may, I mean, from the opposite perspective in terms of sex, I mean, I have some friends who are women who are quite tall, and they've struggled with this. So, you referred to the masculinity standpoint of this, Sileem. I would say that for a lot of my friends who are a bit taller, I have 2 friends that are over 6 feet tall that are women, and both of them struggled with this from the perspective of it's not seen as being feminine, that it is seen as an extension of awkwardness and not necessarily as graceful or as feminine as a lot of society projects it to be. And it's very challenging for them being tall. And it took them much longer, I think, to kind of embrace their physicality and see themselves in that way as a beautiful person physically, that maybe some others it's a bit easier because the imagery and the ideals are just not necessarily always framed that way. And it took them a bit longer.
Well, if my wife is listening to this show, she's probably hearing you loud and clear, because she's 5'9", and she's only like an inch shorter than me. So she could speak to that. She grew up as being not just one of the tallest women in the class, but for some of her time, she was actually among the tallest in the class of both men and women, or boys and girls. And especially when you're like 11, 12, 13, starting to hit that kind of dating time, or when boys and girls start noticing each other and all that, she said it was super awkward the guys would be intimidated by the fact that she was as tall as them or taller. And that's kind of leveled out. 5'9" is still pretty tall, but it's not quite, I'm just an inch taller, but she doesn't feel, but she puts heels on. She could be taller than me, and she can feel self-conscious about that. So, but yeah.
I mean, on that dating point, I mean, that's actually an interesting point and I didn't really think about that straight away, but, it is a social thing, right? Especially for women to want to be with men who are taller than them. Typically that's the case, right? By default, right? There are more taller men than there are tall women, or men are typically more taller than women. So for me, I in the past got a lot of, Sileem, if you were a little bit taller, I'd go out with you. And I'm like, dang. I wish I had, 3 more inches on me.
Were you offended by that? Because it doesn't sound like you were offended by that.
No, I mean, it's fine, right?
You kind of got it in a way, like it was.
Well, I mean, I think of it this way. I mean, if all you're looking at is my height, then I'm probably better off not dating you at all. So. Okay. So offended was probably a big word that I used there, but so you're saying it was sort of, it was disappointing, but I was like, yeah, I get it.
It's funny you say that, because I would see that more from women that maybe were of similar height to you. Maybe someone even shorter, 5'2" to like 5'6". They want this big person, the protector ideal that some people kind of get into. But I mean, of the few people that I'm friends with that are taller, actually, many of them dated men much shorter than them. They were completely good with that. They didn't care at all. One of my friends, she's 6'1", and most of the men she dated were 5'6", 5'7", 5'8". Yeah. So, I don't know. Maybe you didn't meet the right tall woman.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, in any case, I ended up getting married.
I know,
as I mentioned earlier, and I think she's like an inch shorter than me, so it all kind of works out.
It does. No, that's good. Okay, next question. If you had spent more time learning to play the piano at school than you did learning algebra, would you be spending more time playing the piano than you do using algebra today? And that's kind of for me, that's an interesting question, because there's two things going on there. I don't use algebra in my job today, so that's a quick one. I can say no. I would be playing the piano more, because even if I played the piano once since I left school, the answer would be yes, I'd be playing piano more. But I also I would be playing piano more because I wish I had learned it. I know how to play it a bit. But so for me, the answer is an easy yes, because I just don't use algebra in my job. I wish I could play the piano, and if I could, I'd be playing it a lot more. So
I use a bit of math. I use a bit of algebra in my work, in my day-to-day. Not because I want to, because I have to. And I mean, I was never really a great student to begin with. So I don't know but I guess if I had learned piano, I probably would use it more, because I actually like the piano. My aunt is a piano teacher, and I loved hearing her play. So if I had the chance, I'd probably be using piano more, because I actually want to use it or play.
How about you? Yeah. How about you, Justin?
Yeah, so from a mathematics standpoint, I'm definitely not an actuary. I'm definitely not on the level of needing advanced mathematics in my day-to-day life for the most part. But obviously, I enjoy being good at mathematics. It was one of my stronger suits growing up, and still is to this day. But I would definitely trade it for the piano, hands down. I always have melodies playing in my head. I'm always writing songs out. And I taught myself and also learned formally several instruments at a certain level, trumpet, piano, drums, a few others for that matter, and guitar. And I sort of wish that I did.
Do you want to throw like 3 more instruments in there just to make us feel even worse?
You taught yourself all that?
Taught myself some of those. Others I formally learned as well.
Wow.
Yeah. And I wish I'd kind of hunkered down and really learned piano. I really wish that I'd gone through that. And that's something I can still do. I actually just recently picked up a guitar again, and I'm starting to fiddle around with that. I actually just picked up something else that I used to do before, but maybe we'll dive into that later in the podcast. But yeah, I kind of do wish that I'd hunkered down and learned piano at a depth that would allow me to functionally play out what I'm imagining and what I'm conceptualizing, and spend more time putting some of those things to paper, so to speak.
Well, and two, the question says if you had spent time learning it in school. Right. I think that's an important element here, is that if piano had been a class, like right. the way math was a class, the way English or geography were classes that we had, what if piano was a class?
Well, it is if you go to a magnet school, right? Or if you go to, an arts and performing school.
Sure. But if it was even just in a regular, as a regular course, just like geography or science, it happened to be a class. I guess for me, I don't know, because I did have the opportunity to take lessons as a kid, and like many kids, I just dreaded the whole thing. And I like my dad said, Clark, you'll regret it later in life. Rather than say, you'll really appreciate it later in life. Actually, I think he did say that, but he did say you would appreciate it. And as normally at least me, we don't heed those sorts of advice, that sort of advice that we get from our parents, which maybe we'll get into that a little bit in the next segment, sort of a nice segue into the next segment. But Sileem, you wanted to talk about a product that you recently acquired or got. Tell us about that product. We don't have official sponsors on this show, but we like to include occasionally something we like, a product or a service, and just as an unofficial sponsor. So what have you got there?
Yeah, so a friend of mine actually gave me a wedding gift, and he knows I like coffee, so he gave me this contraption called the Bialetti Mocha Pot Express, and basically it's a coffee maker, right? Or espresso maker. It's not a machine. You put it over a heat source, whether that's like an IH or gas heater or stove, and you can make coffee with it, right? And I'm really enjoying it. I usually just drink instant coffee or something simple at home, but the way the contraption works is really interesting. I won't get into the details, but if you want to check it out, it's pretty cool, and the coffee that you can make with it is actually really good. So
is this like the silver Italian looking thing, or Italian?
It's like a pot, yeah. It's like the Italian pot thing, and it's kind of got like different sections where you put the water, the coffee, the ground coffee, and then it when you heat the water, it kind of just rises through the coffee and then through a pipe, and then it percolates. That's the correct term. Percolates in the top section, and that's the coffee that you can drink. And I'm making like lattes and stuff with it, and it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
Nice. Yeah, and I always include the link in the show notes, so I'll have to get the details of that name, and I'll include that for those that are interested in seeing it. All right, so we're moving to our next segment, which is an idea Justin brought to the table. It's I'll try. You know what, Justin? Let me just turn it right over to you. You can open this up. What's the topic, and where did it come from? What made you think of it?
I was kind of thinking about from the framing of, for those of us who are parents, or for those of us who want to become parents or will become parents at some point, if that's something of interest, or even from our own experiences as children that we had from our own parents. I was wondering, what's something that we experienced as a child that we would like to replicate, or something that we experienced as a child that we would not want to replicate with our own children in terms of how we parent. Taking my own parents, for example, my parents were very engaged. They were very supportive throughout my childhood and adolescence and into adulthood, of course. And one of the things that really struck me with my father, even though he was somebody who was frequently on the go, traveling quite a bit, and very in demand in terms of his role and what he was doing at work, he always tried very hard to be present, even if he couldn't be. So, before technology, before FaceTime, before Zoom, before everything else that, made it possible for us to connect while we're away from each other physically or distance-wise, he would always try to call when he was on a trip. And if he was around and he had a lot of work on his plate, he would always keep track of when I had a baseball game or a basketball game or something like that, and make sure that on those days he was out the door extremely early, and that he was out the door from work early enough that he was getting to a 5 o'clock game or a 4 o'clock game so he could catch, or maybe it's 6 and he's catching the last half of those things. And for myself, that's something I've tried to replicate with my children as well. During this at-home experience, this remote work experience, as well as at-home learning for a lot of our children, we were very present for a lot of that. And during the remote work part of it, it also means that some of the activities that our kids are engaging in, maybe we can shift our schedules around and prioritize certain things and still frame out our daily work schedule, but be available to bring them to swimming or bring them to something in the evening. And I've really enjoyed that. That's something that I knew that I was already trying to do as much as I could for my children, but even more so now. And I'm not trying to tie it to COVID necessarily, but I would ask the same question to you, Clark, and as well, Sileem, if and when you want to be a parent, or if that's something of interest to you, or even from your own experience, what was something that you experienced that you really embraced, you enjoyed, and was fruitful to your own experience being raised, or something that you would want to carry on to someone that you had as a child?
Yeah, well, hearing what you were saying about your father making the time to attend your games, that's certainly something my dad did a lot of as well. He was pretty busy as an office worker. Like, he worked in financial services, and he could never coach a team. And I always wanted, I think a lot of kids wanted their parents to be the coach, both for the benefits that sometimes the kids of the coach get, which my father would have never bestowed any of those privileges upon me, which would have been fine and a good thing. Coach's son is not always the best person to be. But one thing I really respect is that my dad, well, he kind of put that out there. I used to always ask, can you be the coach? Can you be the coach? And he'd said, I think one year he was the assistant coach. So he could be the coach showing up at 10 minutes to the game because he was driving all the way from Toronto to after an hour and a half commute to where we lived at the time. It was okay to be the assistant coach and show up, a few minutes before the game. But if you were the coach, you had to drop the lineups and do all that stuff. It wasn't possible. So I will say, though, my dad attended almost every game I ever played. I played baseball and was at any things I was doing at school productions and things like that. So I'm going to steal that one because that's something my dad did. And I do have that same feeling for my kids, that I will always be absolutely trying my best to attend their games or their performances or whatever it might be for both my kids. So, yeah.
Thank you, Clark. Yeah. Sileem, did you have any kind of experiences that you drew from or that you'd want to replicate if you did start a family yourself?
Yeah, I'd certainly like to have kids someday. That's certainly something that's on the radar for me. Interesting question. My parents were actually pretty hands-off, and they kind of let me they allowed me to pretty much do whatever I wanted, in a sense, within certain bounds. And for me, I thought then and still think now that it was one of the best parenting decisions from them, ever. And I think it allowed me to think independently growing up. When I went away to college and left Egypt where I lived, they basically said, here you go, you're off to college, you go figure yourself out. And that worked immensely well for me, I think, and really made me into the person that I am today. So for that, I'm certainly thankful for them, giving me that independence, that free roam. And that's certainly something that I would like to eventually give my children in the future as well. Just, allow them to, figure the world out on their own within certain guidelines. Tell them what potential consequences for things are, decisions, but allow them to make the decisions that they need to make on their own. A quick small example of this would be, when I was in my later teens, my father said, you go kind of do whatever you need to do as a teenager, but worst comes to worst, and let's say you get arrested, I'm not gonna come bail you out. You are going to rot in jail for the rest of your life, or forever, or however long you're going to be incarcerated. And I was like, okay, fair point. Gotcha.
Was that just so he knew you didn't have that ability to just say, well, fine, I'll screw up and I've always got dad to come get me?
Yeah, exactly. So it was just, it made me think, right? It's like, okay, I need to make decisions that will, that will not lead to my arrest if I do decide to do something stupid. Or it's either don't get arrested or don't do the bad deed, right? So
right, yeah.
I mean, what you shared, it sounds like there's two big components of self-responsibility and a lot of dealing with ambiguity that you had to learn for yourself. And did you feel like that helped prepare you for navigating the world around you in early adulthood or in adulthood now or in the professional workspace? How did you feel like those lessons impacted you? Yeah,
I mean, I think one of the bigger lessons I think were how to deal with money, for instance, right? And that's a big part of that was when I was sent off to college, and my parents said, "Well, we're going to pay for your rent, and that's it. You go get a student loan, and you go find a job, right? And if you don't find a job, if you're unable to make money, then good luck finding something to eat, and it was things like small or maybe big things like this that allowed me to be the, I guess, adult, however you define adult, that I am today. And yeah, for that, I'm definitely thankful, and it absolutely contributed to, in a positive way, I think, to who I am now.
Yeah, that's interesting because I mean, it's tough to let go of, like, when you have kids. I mean, you hear these terms like helicopter parenting and things like that, where some parents are just so on top of every single step and move and constantly like monitoring everything and worried all the time, and that's just natural to be worried about your kids. But I do think there are negatives to that not letting kids fall down and make mistakes and learn for themselves how to fix things. I think I'm not sure I'd go so extreme on that. If you get in jail, I'm not coming to bail you out. I don't know. Maybe that's a good thing to say, because that is an extreme. So it's kind of I see the point with that.
I've never been arrested, so I haven't put that to the test.
Yeah.
Maybe he would bail me out. I'm not sure.
Yeah, there was no the house is not collateral, Sileem.
Say that again, Justin.
I was saying the house is not collateral for you, Sileem.
No.
Well, to your point, Clark, I mean, real brief, the flip side of this is the helicopter parents is one side. Well, let's say you're a parent who, as a child, as an adolescent, you were a risk taker and you did a lot of things that were a little bit on the edge of things, and you became fairly aware of some of the risks that a teenager or an adolescent could encounter. Flip side of that is you know what to watch out for, and you know what your children may be exposed to. So to your point about letting them fall down so they can stand up again and learn the lesson of what it means to fail and what it means to experience certain things, there's also that element of having to kind of bite your tongue sometimes too, where maybe you do know where something's coming and you do know that they could be exposed to a certain type of risk, and you just need to keep your mouth shut.
Yes.
Because they need to experience that for themselves. They need to see that. They need to learn that lesson, good or bad, hard way. They need to experience that. And in the end, from my perspective at least, parenting, a lot of it is just decoding the world, right? The world is hard enough out there. Inside, you're safe, but I'm going to help you decode what's going on out there and what maybe you should watch out for. But in the end, you have to figure out what you're looking at.
The necktie. Tell us about this one, Sileem. What brings this idea to the table?
Yeah, so I mean, I was thinking recently about how free I am, very luckily, at the moment, to not have to wear any sort of any type of formal work attire anymore. I'm working from home pretty much 95% of the time now. So I'll go into the office maybe once every 3 weeks, once a month maybe. And I was just thinking, I'm not a big fan of the tie. If I don't have to wear it, I won't. And Clark, we worked together for a while. I was probably one of the more casually dressed, if not the most casually dressed person in the office usually.
Yes. Yeah.
And maybe it's a factor of my age as well. But I mean, I'm just for wear whatever is most comfortable for you. And I understand the tie as a fashion accessory, right? It adds a bit of something to the suit, right? I guess. I just wanted to get you guys' opinion on ties, right? On wearing ties. Do you like wearing ties? And because it is something that doesn't necessarily serve a particular purpose. It is just a fashion accessory. Is it something that should be mandatory? Is maybe a bit too far, but often in certain business settings, you're almost kind of required to wear a tie. And I wonder whether that requirement is valid, right? Should people be required to wear ties? And that could lead into the whole sort of dress code conversation. But before you guys give your opinions, I did a bit of quick research on origins of the tie and where it came from, and I was a bit surprised at what I found. So basically, the tie traces its origins back to the mid 17th century and were originally worn by Croatian mercenaries to protect their necks from the elements, apparently. And I guess whatever
from the elements,
else.
not from attack, but from the elements.
From the elements, I guess from attack as well. I mean, if you're a mercenary, that there's always, I guess, that risk, right? And that item was that inspired Parisians of the time to create this new clothing accessory, the cravat, right? Which transformed into what we know as the tie today. So it's been around for a very long time.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, okay. So on the tie topic, I always liked, this is one of the things that I really thought about when I was thinking about my career was, what am I going to do with myself? Like as a young age, I would be thinking about different careers, as a lot of kids do. And I had the typical ones, police officer, fireman, but my dad always wore a tie to work. And so I used to see him go to work every day in a suit and tie. And I really thought that was cool. I thought the suit and tie thing, I said, that's gotta be me. I want to be the one walking out of the house and coming home every day wearing a suit and tie. So but I've recently started to become more against it, in the sense that I'm also enjoying this more casual kind of way things are with COVID, that we're not coming into the office now. So I wore a hoodie yesterday all day, and I had a call with a client that I didn't expect was going to be was going to be a video call. He set it up, and when I logged in, there he was. He wasn't in a tie, but he was in a dress shirt. And I just realized, as I saw my reflection in the little window there, that I'm wearing this hoodie with like the little tassels hanging down.
Right, yeah.
And I felt kind of awkward about that. And I didn't apologize. But I got to admit, I have actually been thinking of sending him a note to say, good call yesterday. Thanks for sharing the information. Oh, by the way, and put a little note in about the hoodie. I mean, that could be, okay, just kind of light stuff. And he's a pretty casual guy, but just in terms of what you were saying about how it's a requirement, or it feels like it is, I definitely put a tie on more because I have to, because I think others are going to have them on. But I'm more in your direction now, which is I don't think we need to have the tie, especially if it logistically doesn't make sense. Like in those Tokyo summers, we used to always talk about some of the people that would visit from abroad, and you could tell when we said, no, we don't need to even wear a jacket going to someone's office, because a lot of we check with the clients and they were pretty super cool about it. But I know that isn't always the case. So I do like ties. I think they can be beautiful looking pieces of fabric. And so there are times where a tie works for me, like especially if I'm going to go out, but I'm becoming more not interested in the tie thing because I just find it bothers my neck.
Yeah,
it bothers my neck way more than it used to. Like I used to hear people say, "Oh, I don't want to be choked by this thing," and I never got that. But now I don't know. Maybe I've gained weight, and just the way a tie feels on me is different than it used to be. But yeah, it is an interesting. Justin, what about you? What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm of a couple minds, and I mean, from the standpoint of the business side and the practicality side, I mean, I think we have to come to an agreement on what's uniform, right? Sometimes some clients, some companies, as you know, are a bit more formal than others, and it's almost an expectation. It's like I'm meeting with such and such. I need to look a certain way. All their people are going to be this way. And then with others, you know, it's just very laid back. It's open top button, and it's just a shirt and a blazer, if that. And from the standpoint of the business uniform, I don't see why it's an absolute. If you look at, you know, kind of to your point before about wearing the hoodie and having the tassels hanging out and wanting to maybe send a note, you know, I'm of the mindset, it's like exec presence, right? This is who I am. I'm presenting my ideas. You're here to talk to me about this, not about what I'm wearing, not about any of this other nonsense.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you look at Silicon Valley and the tech industry, they're completely anti this. You know, it's all hoodies and t-shirts and jeans and khakis and down vests, and it's its own uniform, but
mock turtlenecks.
Yes, exactly. Well, if you're VC. So, you know, I think we have to kind of come to an agreement as to what the modern uniform is if we're going to get people into the framing of being comfortable with not having it. I think people should be comfortable. I think we should be explicit about it. And I think there should be kind of a tone set in general. To what you said before, Clark, about how you would see your father wearing a tie and how you had a connection to that to a degree. My connection was a bit different. My connection was more so seeing my father come back and going, ugh, and taking his tie off. So my connection was, this is the release. This is like, I can be me. This is the point where I can just relax. And that to me kind of struck a chord. Like, well, wait a minute. If this is the version of you that you're enjoying yourself, the most relaxed and everything else, why go through all of that, right?
Yeah.
Why go through
That's interesting.
through doing that? The other part of this, the other mind that I have of this, and as I believe you're both aware, I had a former life and career in fashion. And in fashion, I really loved the tie, because in fashion was about an expression of who you were, your personality. It was maybe a projection to a certain degree of what you were trying to show the world, or show whatever that setting was, or that event you're going to, of who you are and what you want to do. And in many ways, the tie kind of, for lack of a better word, ties it all together. So you're playing off of suit patterns, you're playing off of the colors of the shirt, you're playing off of the fabrics and textures. You're sometimes, actually oftentimes, it was a conversation piece for a lot of folks. I know a lot of people in the finance industry loved Hermes ties because they were these very, very ornate patterns, and oftentimes had a focal point to that pattern. It'd be, you know, all one jacquard or diamond pattern, and then something right in the middle of it of like a monkey jumping up and down with a ball or something, right? So no different than our female counterparts who would maybe have a specific type of costume jewelry or something like that became the focal point. Men also had that as well. So it was an expression in a way of personality, of something beyond just being the CFO or whatever of organization X. And I appreciate that part of it. I like, quote unquote, playing dress up and doing that whole thing when I was especially in fashion, and still to this day from time to time. So I appreciate that part of it. But from a day-to-day standpoint, from a summer standpoint, I'm out with that. Forget it. I'm done. There's no reason to do any of that. That's just torture for no reason.
Tokyo summers especially. And I get it, right? So, I mean, as an expression of fashion, I think it's totally cool. People should, in my opinion, people should just be able to wear whatever they want. And it's the idea that, well, if I'm meeting with someone and they're, you know, fully kitted out, you know, suit and tie, the whole thing, right? Do they feel left out if I'm not wearing a tie? If I'm coming, you know, to a meeting in a hoodie and jeans, you know, this is my way of expressing, you know, myself. This suit and tie is the way you want to express yourself. I think that's fine. Like, I mean, for me, I wouldn't worry about what the other person is wearing at all, right? In fact, I encourage them to just wear whatever they like, and I would like for other people to think the same for me. And sort of that's
I think a lot of this though comes to because there's a lot of energy that's been spent or expended on, should I wear a tie today? Should I not wear a tie today? And then if we all just sort of said, look, just wear whatever we want. Sound good, guys? Yeah, cool. Let's do it. I wanted to say one more thing because I want to move on, but you at one time, Sileem, said a uniform was something you thought that would make a lot of sense. And
so the concept of the uniform was more, you know, if you wanted people to just all wear the same thing, or somewhat similar, right? Instead of having that ambiguity of, oh, you know, just dress work casual or, you know, dress appropriately for the office. And that's kind of ambiguous, right? If you want people to wear the same thing, you just give them a uniform, and then no one has to think about what they're going to wear, you know, that day. Obviously, it's the, you know, the polar opposite of expressing yourself, right? It's totally just, you know, it's a uniform, right? Makes everyone uniform, makes everyone the same. So that's not really interesting, but it eliminates a lot of ambiguity.
The closest thing I can think of to that, because we know of other professions that have uniforms, like the police, which the uniform is a symbol of something, right? Even like people that do cleaning, like a lot of them will have specific uniforms they wear. I think the closest thing to what you're describing would be the school uniform, where to remove the element of personal choice of fashion and some of the pressures that can kind of come with that, the image it presents when everybody's dressed the same way. I guess the school uniform would probably be the closest thing I can think of to like a work uniform in a business setting, like a, you know, white collar job setting.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only other person I can think of that kind of held something like that was Albert Einstein. He had this whole thing where he wore basically the same outfit every day. He had 5 of the same set of clothes, same sweater, same shirt, same pants.
Steve Jobs was kind of the same, right? With the black mock turtleneck and the jeans. With the black.
Yeah, except with Steve, he was buying like $700 cashmere mock necks. It wasn't quite as shabby as Albert was pulling. But Albert's whole thinking around it was just, you know, I don't want to be spending the energy or the time on this. I'd rather be focused on the problems of the day, the problems that I'm working on, instead of spending any energy on that.
Well, Obama used to say that he only wore, he might still say it, but he wore blue and black or blue and gray only. Whereas he only had 2 colors of suits. And all white, always white shirts, and usually a 1 or 2 solid ties, like blue and maybe one other color, because it would go with every single thing. So he could wear that tie with whatever suit he was wearing. He could wear that shirt with whatever suit he was wearing. And I actually started to do that same principle as I was starting to buy clothes. I thought, I'm just going to get stuff where I don't need to look at the tie like 3 times over and decide, does this match with the shirt I'm wearing? Does the shirt match with the jacket? Does the jacket match with this? And so I think there's a lot to be said in that mental energy that gets expended, that just having there's no decision. Kind of like putting your clothes out the night before, and in a way it's like it's there. It's one less thing to think about as I start my day.
Yeah, absolutely. Now the fashion conscious person would say, you know, that's just really boring. But I agree with you, right? I'd rather just, I don't want to think too much about what I have to wear on any given day. If it's practical, if it looks good, that's what I'm going to wear.
All right, Sileem, we're going to finish off with your strange news story. What do you got there for us? Is it strange? Is it weird? Am I setting it up the right way? What do you have for us?
I guess it's kind of strange, kind of representative of our times as well. So the news article I picked up was from back in July, and it's from South Korea, right? So apparently there's a surge in damaged cash, and it's damaged by people in South Korea microwaving and putting cash, like bills, in microwave and washing machine to try to get rid of the coronavirus.
Okay. Huh. What do they? If you got the headline there, what does the headline actually say?
Yeah, so the headline says surge in damaged cash on worried South Koreans try to microwave the virus.
Yeah, interesting.
So the central bank there is saying that there's been a threefold increase in the amount of burnt money they're asked to exchange, and that amounted to $1.1 million US in the first half of 2020. And like I said, some people are putting that cash in washing machines as well. And there's this one guy who went to the central bank of Korea, right, with the equivalent of $32,000 US, right, that he put in the washing machine. About a third of that money, those bills got destroyed, and he was only able to replace $20,000 worth. So the guy lost $12,000 US because he put his cash in the washing machine.
I'd argue he deserved to lose a lot more than that. But maybe that's...
Yeah, I agree.
It must not have been a modern Samsung, because they do have the cash setting on the newer models.
Yes, I believe so. Yeah.
Now, did they besides the coronavirus part? Because I have a theory, not a theory, but a loose connection that I'd like to raise in a second here. But did they specifically say why they were so fearful of their cash that they needed to rid it of potential coronavirus? What was I mean, as a base, yes, we get it. Coronavirus is the reason, the rationale. But why is it that the cash needed to be washed? Not anything extreme in their day-to-day life beyond that. I mean, what was it exactly? And I'll get in a moment to why I'm making this weird connection, but was it just that, or did they express anything else as to the relationship with money or being in contact to money that they were specifically very afraid of the coronavirus?
Well, in this one case of the guy who put $32,000 US equivalent in his washing machine, he'd got that money from as funeral condolence money from family and friends. So obviously the guy
came from multiple sources.
Yeah, came from multiple sources. So maybe that's why he was worried, and then decided to shove it in the washing machine. But I'm interested in the segue to that, Justin.
Well, the segue is, as an American, there are some very weird facts and figures out there, and I remember at one time reading something about the fact that of the total U.S. currency in circulation, something insane, like 70 or 80% of it at one time had the residue of cocaine.
I've heard that.
And with that in mind, would there be an intense fear that this thing that they're now putting up against or into their nose is carrying a potential virus that they'd be then inhaling into them? And I have no idea what the drug abuse culture is like in Korea, South Korea specifically, but I was wondering if there were other tangential or parallel drivers as to why the specific segment of Koreans were trying to sterilize their bills. I mean, you don't need $32,000 worth of bills to, I guess, get high every day if you're into that, but...
Well, what's interesting, too, is I'm not sure about Korea, but in Japan, as we know, there's so much cash being used in many transactions. I mean, I certainly never withdrew as much cash when I was living in North America as I did in Japan. I mean, like once a week I was taking $500-$600 out of the cash machine because of how much cash tended to be how I operated, because that's just the Japan society. But I did often wonder, like, okay, here we are passing bills to one another. Isn't that a way to spread this virus? In North America, there's much more of cashless society, credit cards, debit cards, tapping the machines. I have an old Japanese bank card that doesn't have a chip on it, but every other thing I have here, all my Canadian banking stuff, it has a chip. I can tap almost anywhere I go, kind of like Apple Pay, but with the card itself.
Yeah.
But Japan's such a cash. Maybe Korea's the same way. They use cash a lot more. But I did often think after getting here, like, wow, cash would be like, if you go to a drive-through here, like for food, like coffee or Starbucks or whatever, it's all cashless. They put the little terminal, they hold the terminal out, and you tap it. And so I could see this being a concern. The cocaine connection is quite interesting, but I could see they used to say that don't put that money in your mouth, even as a kid, like you just had like a coin or something. So interesting.
Yeah, I mean, general practice, right? You definitely do not want to. I mean, pre-COVID, with cash, right? It is. I think there's a perception that it is a little bit dirty, right? I mean, you don't know who's touched it before. You don't know what they've done with that cash. Maybe they used it to snort cocaine. Maybe they used it for other unsightly things. So yeah, it's just weird.
Thanks for the story. I think it was a good one. I think the whole episode, Sileem, you brought a few things that I didn't know. I had no idea about the Croatian mercenary connection to the necktie. So we've talked about in the past how we like to provide some education through this podcast. And I think that was, I appreciate your contribution here, and hope both of you guys will come back again sometime.
Thanks. Yeah, really enjoyed being a guest on the show, and hopefully there'll be a second time.
Yeah, thanks on my end as well, and listeners, fair warning, we'll be back.